بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعجل فرجه.
ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم everybody, and congratulations to you all for the amazing occasion of the birth of صاحب العصر والزمان عجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. And inshallah, to send the thawab of this session to our Mawla, we're going to start by reciting Dua al-Faraj, inshallah. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم كن لوليك الحجة ابن الحسن صلواتك عليه وعلى آبائه في هذه الساعة وفي كل ساعة وليا وحافظا وقائدا وناصرا ودليلا وعينا حتى تسكنه أرضك طوعا وتمتعه فيها طويلا برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. So inshallah, today we're going to look at the second step towards actualization. So last week we spoke about the loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Today we're going to look at loving Ahlulbayt. Before we want to delve into this topic, we mentioned a topic briefly in our fifth lecture, the intellectual soul, which came about with many questions, and so we want to address these questions properly and try to clarify the concept. And we apologize for any of the confusions which it may have caused, and we would like to explain it through an example. And hopefully this example clarifies this, and we would appreciate it if you could just consider this as the meaning for now, rather than what we said previously. The reason being is after all the questions we looked more into it and we have a better understanding of the concept. Not everything, of course, Ahlulbayt is not open to us, but we've looked at a few things, and this is what we hopefully would make sense out of it, inshallah. So we do apologize for any of the inconvenience. So this concept is the roles of barzakh and hell and the difference between them. And the example we want to use for this is the movie Avatar. If you haven't seen it, it's not a problem, because we're using it as a hypothetical situation rather than the plot of the movie. And so what you need to know is that Avatar is about humans going to this other planet called Pandora, and this planet, it has a completely different atmosphere and ecosystem, and humans can't live in this planet. It doesn't have any oxygen. The food on this planet is inedible to humans. And so what the humans decide to do, because they want to mine this particular thing in the movie, but for now, let's say, humans can't get back to Earth. They have to live on this planet, but it doesn't have the things that they require. So what they do is decide that we need to create these bodies or something which can enable us to survive on this planet. So the first thing the humans do is they build a lab. And in this lab, they're trying to create these bodies for themselves and transfer their souls into these bodies so that they can survive on this new planet of Pandora. And these bodies resemble the bodies of the native people. Okay, so what they're doing is the scientists are studying the native people, the things, the body, their anatomy, what they need, and then they're trying to match it up with their own bodies and their own genetics so that it's easy for them to transfer their souls from one body to the other. Okay, and after the scientists managed to do that, they also went out in these new bodies to meet the natives and try to form a line of communication so that they know that when all the humans are going to transfer to this body, it's not going to be like they're invading, but they want to live with them on this new planet and explore it. However, some of the people in the lab, they weren't working hard like the scientists. Instead, what they were doing was they were partying and enjoying their time in the lab. You know, when you have a lot of people together, all you want to do is socialize and that kind of thing. And that's what they were spending their time. Unfortunately, though, the oxygen was running low inside the lab. They only had a limited supply, and they know that once the oxygen runs out, they're going to die unless they transfer into these new bodies of theirs. Okay, and only the scientists noticed. So when the scientists transferred to the body, it was really easy for them. They didn't need time because they'd already done it before. It was simple for them. But for the other people who weren't concentrating so much on building these bodies, their bodies weren't fully formed, or they hadn't created the right shape for the body, so they can't do all the features that they need. So they don't have hands, or they don't have mouths to speak with, and it makes living on this planet difficult for them. And they may have created a body, but they forgot to create the connections with the body so that when they transfer the soul into the body, they can't actually control it. They're just living inside of a shell, pretty much. And that's not good. So when the oxygen ran out, the people who were partying, they didn't want to come along into their new bodies because they recognized if they go into these new bodies, they're not going to be able to do anything. But the scientists and the natives that were friends with the scientists, they were not going to let any of the humans die because they like them. So what they end up doing is dragging all these scientists and putting them into the pods which will transfer their soul from this body that's going to die into their new body, which they can live in for the rest of their lives in Pandora. So this is very similar to what happens to us. So remember, our actions build the bodies of our akhirah. So the people who haven't concentrated on building up these bodies are not going to have fully formed or beautiful bodies. Okay, but the thing is, we can't stay in this world forever. Our oxygen is running out and we need to transform. So, barzakh is this process of us being dragged into these new bodies. Why are we being dragged? Because just like a tree, we've created really big roots which have attached us to this dunya. And so when we're attached to this dunya, it becomes very, very difficult for us to be detached from this body and be put into a body of our akhirah. Because we recognize that we haven't actually put that much effort into the akhirah. Or some people don't even believe in the akhirah, but they have to be transported there so that they could survive. And then hell is represented by the fact that now we have to live in this non-functional body, or this body that is not appropriate for our survival. So for example, in the Quran it says for the people who are in hell, and it's not going to quench their hunger. And the reason for that is because they haven't built adequate bodies to be able to, survive in the hereafter. And so the only thing they get is this displeasure and pain through them. It's because they have created these non-functioning things because their actions weren't good. Okay, and then yes, and they cannot die. Like people in hell, they cannot die because they have these bodies now. There's no other body that they can create because our time has run out, the test has run out, so they have to keep living through that. And heaven is for the people who were able to do this process easily. And so what they're going to do is be able to live in this new body and try to evolve and spiritually and to understand their surroundings, and they'll be eternally happy. They're going to find companions which they can help and grow themselves even more, and they can have the best thing of all is this connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala all the time. So the question is, who are these scientists, and how can we be the scientists as well? Well, the thing is, we need to invest our time in learning and trying to get to the akhirah, not this life. That's what the scientists were doing. They were investing in understanding and trying to get to the outside world rather than focusing on the lab. And that's what we're trying to do, and the first step to that is gaining knowledge. But we already have scientists. Sometimes the thing we have to do is just tag on to the scientists and listen to them. And those scientists in this example are Ahlulbayt, the people who know that world outside so well and have been able to create their bodies and have gone out there and spoken to the natives, all of that, and they've come back and they're telling us that this is good. We can help you to do that as well, inshallah. And that's why it's really important to follow Ahlulbayt. So we're talking about the Ahlulbayt, now we need to talk about the love aspect. And so last week we said, what is love? We didn't have a specific definition, and the reason is that love is different towards the different people that you're connecting with. So you could love yourself or have a love towards your parents or a partner or your desires. These are all different forms of love by definition, but we know that how we create those connections are very different. But love has the same symptoms all the time. So some of the symptoms of love is that you're happy when the person that you love is happy, and that you're sad when the person that you love is sad. It's because you've emotionally grown towards them, and so all their emotions you feel as well. The thing is that you don't like being separated from them, and so you wait for the time to be with them, and you're really impatient for that time to see with them. And inshallah we can grow these symptoms with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our Ahlulbayt as well. And the last symptom is that if you love someone, your self-importance and your own desires tend to reduce. I mean, they're reflected a lot in Shakespearean plays and that kind of thing, where they say, oh, you know, I've lost my appetite because I was thinking about you, I couldn't sleep at night. These aren't exaggerations. These are some of the symptoms of love, which are seen. Because the Ahlulbayt are human, we can use the same ways of loving other humans to establish our first link relationship with Ahlulbayt as well. As we said last week, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala linked love to the heart, which is the origin of the animalistic soul, because through an actualized soul we can help and start actualizing the other souls. So we need to have that love starting from the heart of the animalistic soul and then growing that to something which is beyond that. So we can start with that. And so that's why we're going to look at the three fundamental principles which lead to attraction between us and other people. And these are similarity, proximity, and familiarity. Okay, and this is known in psychology. And so we want to apply these three principles on our relationship with Ahlulbayt so that we can close the gap between us and create this closeness to them, inshallah. So we're going to start with familiarity. So to be familiar with someone, similarity. To be similar to someone means that you have things which are the same between you. So our friends usually, we like the same games, we like the same things. That's how we bridge our connections with them. And we need to create those same bridges with our Ahlulbayt. And an easy way of doing that is to mirror their actions. Read their stories, look at how they handle situations, and try to apply that in our life, inshallah. And if we start to mirror their good actions, maybe we can grow closer, not only to grow closer to them, but actually start representing what they represent, which are the traits of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. So by being similar to them, we're also creating, bridging our connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and loving Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the same time. So they're very closely related because they are the perfect representations of humans on earth. The second principle was proximity. So unfortunately, living where we are, we're not very close to their shrines, but that doesn't mean that we're not close to them. So proximity means close in distance. And the reason for that is because the imams aren't their buddies. The imams are now in the hereafter, and because they're in the hereafter, it means they're not limited by distances, and so they can be with us right now at any moment and any time. So the best way for us to be proximal with them is by acknowledging that they're here and saying salam to them. And we can do that in different ways, and the primary one is doing ziyarat al-ayyam. So if you guys didn't know, there is a ziyarah of a particular member of Ahlulbayt every day of the week. So we should aim to try and read this so that we can say our salams to them, and we know that if we say salam to them, they're going to return our salams as well. Two other methods which we can do this is by reading Dua al-Ahad every day and Ziyarat either Ashura or Warith every day, inshallah. And we're going to look at these two in a bit more depth. Why is Ziyarat Ashura or Warith so important? I mean, it's only linked to Imam Hussein and none of the other Imams. But if we look specifically at what is said in Ziyarat Ashura, it says, إني أتقرب إلى الله وإلى رسوله وإلى أمير المؤمنين وإلى فاطمة وإلى الحسن وإليك بموالاتكم. So we are going to get closer to the Prophet, Imam Ali, Fatima Zahra, Imam Hassan, and Imam Hussein through this, through being their supporters. Why is that? Why do we need to go through Imam Hussein to get to all of them? And the reason is the event which Imam Hussein represents and what he has done was meant to unlock our emotions. It was meant to hit our heart. And remember, the first point of entry to any form of love is through the heart, which is the origin of the animalistic soul, and that's what the Imam does. And if we can create a connection with Imam Hussein alayhi salam, then he gives us the ability to then create a connection with all the rest of the Ahlulbayt. He's the key to our love to all the Ahlulbayt, and that's why we start from him. And it's his purpose, as we'll see later on, inshallah. As for Dua al-Ahad is a pledge that we're giving to our Imam of the time to tell him that we are here to support him. And the reason why this is important is because this dua is important is because it will actually help us to be physically close to the Imam, Ajalla Ta'ala Farajah Sharif. As it says in the dua, Allahumma ij'alni min ansarihi wa awanah. Allahumma nhala bayni wa baynahu al-maut alladhi ja'altahu ala ibadaka hatman maqdiya fakhrijni min qabri. So it said, there's a hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam which says if you read this dua for 40 mornings consecutively, this will come true. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even if we're dead, will bring us to become one of the fighters and the supporters of the Imam, meaning that we are going to be on his side, reflecting his values, and inshallah becoming close to him physically. And that's why it's really recommended to read this dua as well. So this is how we can get closer to them in distance wise. And the last thing that we have to do as part of the three principles of attraction is to become familiar with them. And when we mean by familiar is not familiar with their stories and what they did, but to be familiar with who they were and why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has brought them. It means we need to understand their universal role and the reason why they came to us and why they did what they did. And to be able to understand that we need to go way back to the beginning. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala offered this challenge and humans took this challenge, remember, to go to the land of mist, the land of forgetfulness. And now it's our purpose and our journey to go back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala so far has given us around 200,000 years and 124,000 guides to be able to do that. Only after that did he send the map. So why was it so late that he sent the map? Why didn't he just give us the map to start off with and let us all follow the map? Two reasons. One, we don't know how to read this map. We need people to be able to help us to read this map. And two, is that when we went to the land of forgetfulness, we did forget. Humans were not developed enough to be able to understand and comprehend all the messages of the Quran. I mean, we're not here today with that comprehension as well, but we have a better understanding of it, and that's due to our Imams. But before the Prophet, peace be upon him, there were two reasons why the Quran couldn't have come down. And the first one is because the people weren't equipped to understand it, and we see that because the prophets all brought down different messages and they were still not believed. And the second reason for that is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala needed someone to be able to carry this map. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, is the only prophet which was able to take on the full Quran in one night, which is Laylatul Qadr. And we know this because it says it in the Quran in Surah Al-Inshirah. So now we have this map. We require someone to help us read this map. So this is the reason why we have the Imams. They are the physical embodiment of the Quran. We call them the spoken Quran for a reason. It's because they reflect every principle in the Quran and they help us. So now we're going to look at how each of them have helped us do this and how they are helping us and aiding us in returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so we start with Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. He brought the Quran, he brought the full message and the pure Islam. So when the shaitan wanted to come and destroy this pure message, he was unable to, because Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi was a protection to all the Muslims who believed. They were untouchable at the time of the Prophet. But once the Prophet, peace be upon him, was martyred, the shaitan took it as his responsibility and duty to try and destroy the map. And he did everything in his power to be able to corrupt the Muslim Ummah. And it started to work. So now you needed people to remove this problem, this infection, this disease that has now been in the Islamic Ummah. And so these people are Fatima alayhi salam and Imam Ali. So Fatima alayhi salam's role was like the surgeon. What she needed to do was to remove this infection and clean the wound. And she did this by stating the truth, so cutting the wound, to reveal the corruption, showing what the infection is, and then showing them what the solution is, taking it out and stitching it back together. And that's what she did. It's reflected in her actions and her khutab, especially khutat Fadak. Would recommend that you would read it just to understand where we're coming from. But that was her purpose in the short time that she had. After you have performed surgery on somebody, you need to help them recover. And so Imam Ali alayhi salam was the nurse of the Ummah. After Fatima Zahra alayhi salam had removed the corruption that existed, he was the nurse which helped it back to its feet. And he did this by teaching the message of the Quran, by being the physical embodiment of the Quran. And he sought justice and executed mercy. And how he did that was he protected the Ummah from any outside infections that wanted to come again. And that's why things like the Battle of Jamal and Battle of Siffin happened. And the last thing was he led by example. So he took the Khalifa, he became the fourth Khalifa. And the reason why he became the fourth Khalifa was to ensure that he's re-establishing the laws and the social policies which come with Islam, which are given in the Quran. But unfortunately, when something is successful and it doesn't suit everybody, there is going to be people who oppose this change. And mostly the people who oppose this change are the people who were really happy with how life was before the Prophet, peace be upon him. Because they had money and they were enjoying all the luxuries that they were given. They were like, why did we need to change the system anyway? I mean, now we can't have slaves, we can't have as many wives as we used to have before. We need to value something more than money. They didn't want that. And the leader of this attack against Islam, one of them is Muawiyah. And so just to kind of put it geographically so that you understand how we're going, this was the size of the Muslim Ummah at the time, approximately. So Iraq, all here. And Muawiyah was in Dimashq. And Imam Ali had established his capital in Kufa. So the first thing that Muawiyah had to do was get rid of Imam Ali. And that's what he did. And he thought he'd won by then. But that's not the case, because it was the role of the sons and daughters of Imam Ali and Imam Hussein, and Imam Ali, to take on the responsibility. And so we start with Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam. So Imam al-Hassan alayhi salam became the Khalifa after his father. But there was this huge army coming out against him, and he only had a few followers. And the reason for that is because people did not want to continue with the right way. It was not suiting or benefiting them. So the treaty was formed between Imam Hassan and Muawiyah. And it's really important to note that this was the treaty that Imam al-Hassan received. Muawiyah had given the Imam a blank piece of parchment with his stamp on it. And this reveals and he said, Imam, you can write everything you want on it, and this will become our treaty. This reveals two things about Muawiyah. The first thing is that he sealed nothing. He did not agree to anything that the Imam had said. And the second thing is he did that deliberately because he doesn't believe in anything that the Imam is going to say. He's a snake. He wanted to trick everybody around them that, oh yeah, we've made a treaty and this is why I'm going to become the Khalifa instead of Imam Hassan. But he wasn't going to apply to the conditions which allowed him to do that. The Imam Hassan didn't mind that. In fact, that was part of the plan, because everybody around them believed that there was a treaty now. And he knew that that Muawiyah would not follow this treaty. So two of the conditions of the treaty were to protect the Shia, and the second that after Muawiyah, Imam Hassan would become the Khalifa. The reason why he agreed to this treaty is to make sure he was protecting the few that were with him. He did not want any harm to come to them, because he knew if they had to fight against that large army, it would not have a good result. And so to protect everybody who were still on the right path, he had to do this. And the second thing is he was orchestrating and revealing the corruption of Muawiyah. So during the rule of Muawiyah, although he did not, quote unquote, hurt the Shia, he did a lot of things which were really, really bad to them. Okay, so I said quote unquote because people think that, but he really did damage a lot of people. And one important thing that he did was he changed Al-Kufa. So Al-Kufa was majority Shia, and what he did was he introduced the Khawarij into Kufa and immigrants, and he exiled a lot of the Shia out of Kufa to change the demographic of the region, which was the capital of Imam Ali alayhi salam. And so by that time, in the short 20 years that he was ruling for, he changed the population to only have 10% of Shia. And remember, this is the same Kufa which asked for the support of Imam Hussein alayhi salam. So it's really important to recognize who these people were. And then he tried many attempts to assassinate Imam Hassan alayhi salam. Because by sealing this deal, Imam Hassan had secured safety for everybody except himself. But he knows that only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is protector. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did. He protected him from many assassination attempts until Muawiyah tricked his wife to give him poison. And that's how he got to him. So he killed two of our beloved Imams. But after Muawiyah died, he put in Yazid. He broke one of the conditions in the treaty, which was that Imam Hussein has to become the Khalifa after Muawiyah. And this is when people started to turn their heads, and they're like, wait, wasn't there a treaty before? Why aren't you following the treaty? So Imam Hassan had orchestrated a fact that he knew that Muawiyah wouldn't follow the treaty, but people didn't recognize Muawiyah as bad. Now they could, because he's broken the treaty. And that's where the role of Imam Hussein comes, because now he has to prove this fact to everybody. And how did he do that? By Karbala, by Ashura. So he absolutely demolished all ideas that these people are good and that the time before Islam was good. He showed them that people needed Islam so that everybody could live truthfully in the truth. And the role after that comes the role of Zainab alayhi salam. So after the events of Karbala, it was important that she had to secure that the events were recalled properly. because if they were not recalled properly, then all the effort of Imam Hassan, Imam Hussein can be diluted and changed to whatever the people wanted it to be changed into. But we know she did her job well, because we still remember this event till today. Her second role was to protect the Imam of her time, Imam Sajjad alayhi salam. So Imam Sajjad was sick during the events of Karbala by the wisdom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that he wouldn't have to go and fight and be killed, so that the legacy of the Imams could continue. And she needed to make sure that he was well enough and that he could continue with that. And the last thing is that she spread the message of Karbala. She spread the events wherever she went. Now we come to the role of Imam Sajjad alayhi salam, because now people have seen what has happened, and Zainab alayhi salam has explained the reasons why this thing has happened. People want change. And Imam Sajjad alayhi salam was the one who's going to facilitate this change for them. And he did it in 3 ways, 3 revolutions. The first one is the emotional revolution. And how he did that was he started Majalis al-Hussein. And because the thing is, we get caught up in this dunya a lot and we forget the message of Imam Hussein. And so he made sure that we get renewed and reminded of this message every single year. The second thing he did was the spiritual revolution, because people have now become emotionally open. They want a way to be able to change and to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for change. And Imam Sajjad has offered that to them through his Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, which is full of ad'iyah which we use when we're trying to get to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Remember last week when we said we need to ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for his love, we actually brought a bit from Munajat al-Muhibbin, which is from Sahifa al-Sajjadiyya, to be able to do that. And Imam Sajjad was the one who gave us this so that we're able to do that. And the last thing he did was the knowledge revolution. So he didn't want to, be fully, none of these revolutions are fully political or opposing the political leaders of the time, because he recognized the importance of being able to change the community and not change the laws which they have to abide to. And so the knowledge revolution is to educate the people around them of what their rights are and what they need to do to be able to live a successful life. And how he did that was he bought slaves, he educated these slaves, and then he freed them so that they become the fathers of the future and the teachers of the future of the Islamic Ummah. And he also did that by RSR2020. He wrote this book which shows everybody of their rights and their duties towards other things as well. So just to recap what we have said so far. After Fatima al-Zahra and Imam Ali alayhi salam had fixed the Islamic Ummah, there was a huge attack again. And so they needed a long, extensive plan to be able to reveal this corruption. And Imam Hassan was the planner of this plan. Imam Hussein executed the plan. Zainab alayhi salam explained the plan. And then after the plan was revealed and people wanted change, Imam Sajjad came as the revolutionary who brought the change that people wanted. So if we say that the Prophet had planted a forest of these new trees and then Shaitan came and burnt this entire forest, after every forest fire, the decomposed trees, they fertilized these soils. And so what these 4 members of Ahlulbayt did was they fertilized the soils so that now we can plant new seeds of change. And we start with Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. He is the planter. He started planting this change. And the first thing he did was by re-establishing Islamic teachings. He did it by introducing new ways to interpret and analyze and new thinking to Islam. So what we mean by this is that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam focused fully on knowledge and being able to access our mind. And he taught this by giving us ways to think, ways of interpreting the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because people at this time were not thinking from themselves. They were only taking what they were being told by people that they trusted, which were their leaders. And the Imam was teaching them that you don't have to follow these leaders if they're corrupt. because only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the truth, and his leaders that he pick, which are the imams, are the leaders of truth, and that we should follow them. And because he knows that one day we're not going to have them around with us to fix every small mistake, he taught us how we are able to make these conscious decisions and to access our fitrah as well. The other important thing about Imam Bakr alayhi salam was he was protecting the integrity of the Islamic Ummah, even though he didn't believe in the political leaders at the time. So for example, what happened? The Romans were becoming a really big force at the time, and they wanted control over the Islamic Ummah, which had a very strong trade. And so they were trying to impose their coins on the Muslimin. Instead of adhering to and falling under Roman rule, which the Imam knew would be really bad for the Muslimin because it will give them no freedom in being able to worship and that kind of thing, even though the Shia were oppressed. But because if they had that same thing, it would adhere to the next stage of the plan. He helped the Khalifa to develop coins for the Muslimin so that they don't have to fall under Roman rule. And this is where we come to the role of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was the expander. Now that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam has ensured that the Islamic Ummah cannot be touched by outside nations, it grew and grew and grew. This is how big it got at the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, which meant that now we can spread Islamic knowledge all over the world. And Imam al-Sadiq created a university and started teaching every kind of knowledge, not only Islamic knowledge. And then he sent his students all over the Islamic Ummah to preach and to teach. And till today, we still use the sciences and the information taught to us by our imams. Like for example, Galileo said when he was inventing the telescope that his idea of optics was taught to him by someone called Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Wonder who that is? But it's really important to understand that everything that we know now has only come from them. But then, during the time of the Imam al-Sadiq, the reason why he was able to spread was because there was political turmoil. But once this political turmoil had rested, someone really bad came along, and Mansur. And Mansur was very oppressive to the Shia, and so was Harun al-Rashid. And so, the next Imam, Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam, taught the Shia how to survive under tyrannical rule. Imam al-Kadhim was the dark horse. And so what he did was he taught us how to become teachers from the inside, how to be passive aggressors, and his role was very similar to the role of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. How? Well, Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam spent most of his life in jail. And the reason he spent most of his life in jail is because these oppressive rules understood how much of an impact the imams are having, and they weren't going to have it because they were creating a lot of societal change. So the imam was like, we can still do this, even though we no longer have freedom because we're being oppressed. We can still teach. And so the few people who were allowed into his cell, they were being taught by the imam. And some of the people who had him in jail, they were starting to get afraid because they were seeing the change around them, and so they would be like, oh Khalifa, we can't keep him in our jail anymore. And so he had to transfer to 4 different jails because the people who were responsible for keeping him in jail were too afraid of what he was doing. And it's really important for us, especially living in this society where, although we're not oppressed, the norms of society are changing to become against us, and people are trying to change our own ideologies through the system. It is really important for us to take on what Imam al-Kadhim was doing, teaching from the inside. So make sure that you're keeping in touch with your children after they come to school, looking at what they're teaching, and fix up everything that may be wrong in what they're being taught at school. Learn that we don't have to go out there and revolt for our rights, but to passively show people that what they're doing is wrong, and this is what we need to be able to have true freedom. That's what we need to take on, the responsibilities. And he is a very good example and role model to us in today's society. So to recap, the second phase is that Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam, once the land was fertile, started to plant the seeds of change. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam increased the fertile land in seeding so that it takes a larger area. And then Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam was the one who taught us that even if we are being oppressed, we can still grow. So even though someone is removing the water from our seeds and trying to pollute our soils, we can still grow. So after that, after they taught us to think for ourselves and through their means, and to be able to live under whatever situation that we have, it's time to prepare us for the recoming of true Islam. And this is the role of our next Imams. So Imam al-Rida alayhi salam taught us that our Imam does not have to be in our location. So till this point, everybody was really dependent on the Imams and the Ahlulbayt. And we see, like, for example, Surah Al-Hajarat was revealed because everybody was like knocking on the door of the Prophet in every aspect. So Imam al-Rida alayhi salam was showing us, no, you don't need us there to be directly, and there are ways to communicate with us. And so we can communicate with our Ahlul Bayt and our Imam, Ajalla Ta'ala Farajih Sharif, through ziyarat and through dua, and through just talking and writing to him. We can do that because they hear us all the time. This is what Imam al-Rida is showing us. Second Imam is Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, and he taught us that age does not matter when it comes to becoming an Imam or a scholar in our case these days. It's about maturity. Because the Imam Jawad alayhi salam was only 8 years old when he became an Imam. Another thing that he taught us, or he brought to us, is the concept of wakala, which is super important because it's really relevant to what happened in the small occultation of our Imam. So he taught us that we do not have to go and see an Imam as a direct point of contact, but we can see the points of contact which the Imams have appointed, because they have the knowledge to be able to answer our questions as well. And this could not have happened. These wukala could not have become who they were if it wasn't for what Imam al-Baqir, Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Kadhim were teaching either. So everything is linked and connected. Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam was 6 years old when he got the imamah. So he's also showing us that age doesn't matter. But he also showed us that Imams can perform miracles. This is important because Imam al-Mahdi alayhi salam has the biggest miracle of all. And if people don't believe in miracles, then they're not, or they don't believe Imams can perform miracles, they're going to doubt Imam al-Mahdi when he comes. So Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam needed to show that Imams can perform miracles. I mean, we've seen it before in other Imams, but Imam al-Hadi was here specifically to reinforce that. And an example of this is the story of Zainab al-Kadhaba, for example. So there was this lady called Zainab, and she was saying, I'm the reincarnation of Zainab alayhi salam. And people were really confused whether or not to believe her. So the Khalifa asked Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam what a strategy is to show or to prove whether or not she's Zainab alayhi salam. And the Imam said, get a pit of hungry lions, and if she can go into that pit and survive, then she's Zainab alayhi salam. And so when the Khalifa was doing that, she's like, no, I'm not Zainab, I was lying. And so he proved the point. But Khalifa was like, oh, this is a good opportunity to get back at the Imam. So what he did, he was like, why don't you do it? And the Imam didn't hesitate. He went into the pit of hungry lions and he spent the night there. And so when they came, they saw that the lions were praying with the Imam. And this is very similar to the miracle of Nabi Daniel alayhi salam. So it's showing that Imams can also perform miracles. And finally, Imam al-Askari alayhi salam had a really short imamah. It was only 4 years. But in those 4 years, he was preparing the Muslims for the occultation of our next Imam. And so how he did that, he wrote a tafsir for the Quran, so that, because at this point everybody was going to the Imams for understanding of the Quran. Remember, they are the guides to the map. But he knows that once, you know, the Imam is going to be ghaib, we're not going to be able to have that direct access to him. We need a book which is how to read a map guide to reading this map, and that's what he was preparing. And then we come to our Imam. Our Imam's role is to return the pure Islam again. And inshallah we can be as part of that. And the roles of the previous 4 Imams are there to help us when it comes to this role. So Imam Mahdi Ajallah Ta'ala Farajah Sharif became an Imam at 5 years old, younger than both Imam al-Jawad and Imam al-Hadi alayhi salam. He went into this small occultation after 4 years, just like Imam al-Askari alayhi salam. And in the small occultation, many people did not have access to him, but he created a wukala so that people can go and ask the wukala for help. So that's why Imam al-Jawad introduced this concept. And then after that, he went into the long occultation, in which nobody has free access to unless you know who your Imam is and you can recognize him, which people have done, but unfortunately we're not at that stage yet. And so the only way we're able to communicate to our Imam is through ziyarah and dua and talking to him, because he's here to hear us, inshallah. So that is the role of all our Imams, and it's really important that we know them. And the reason comes in this dua. اللهم عرفني رسولك فإنك إن لم تعرفني رسولك لم أعرف حجتك. اللهم عرفني حجتك فإنك إن لم تعرفني حجتك ضللت عن ديني. So if we don't know them from the Prophet all the way to Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, we will be lost in our religion. So inshallah we do not get lost in our religion, and that we can apply these 3 principles of attraction, similarity, proximity, and familiarity in our daily lives to get close to both the Ahlulbayt and through them to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshallah. Salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Okay. So now we're going to move to the video segment for today. We're going to look at a movie called The Croods. So The Croods is about this family of cavemen who, have lived in a cave for their entire life, but then their cave got destroyed. And so what they're trying to do is to find a new cave. But on the way they find this person named Guy, and Guy, he's not looking for a cave. He's looking for something else. And this place that he's looking for is called Tomorrow. And he teaches them about tomorrow. And the father really wants to go to a cave, so he doesn't like this idea because he sees that his family is being influenced. Inshallah, the clips that we're going to show you give you an idea of this concept of tomorrow and what happens to the family, inshallah. So this is the first clip.
She'd go near the cliff, for the closer she came to the edge, the more she could hear, the more she could see, the more she could feel. Finally, she stood at the very edge. She saw a light. She leaned out to touch it. Then she slipped.
And she fell.
And she flew.
Where did she fly?
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
A place with more suns in the sky than you can count.
It would be so bright.
A place not like today or yesterday. A place where things are better.
Tomorrow isn't a place. You can't see it.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. I've seen it. That's where I'm going.
So, Sallallahu ala Muhammad wa Muhammad. So, he said tomorrow is a place which is brighter and better than yesterday and today. Okay? He said that he's seen it and he wants to go to it. So these are 3 important concepts that we want you to take from this, because we're going to explain what we linked to tomorrow, inshallah, at the end of all the clips. So the second clip we want to show you is this.
I want to show you something.
suns in the sky than you can count.
Every sun that crosses our sky comes to rest up there.
Tomorrow.
That's where we'll be safe.
So now he's showing them tomorrow. And after this, the family, except for the dad, decide to go with him to tomorrow instead. The father doesn't want to though, but then he recognizes that tomorrow is better than living in a cave, and so he tries to find a way to go to them. And so he has no way to get across to tomorrow, but he looks at what he's seen Guy do throughout their journey, because Guy's gone through them with them throughout the journey. So he looks at, what has Guy done? What things have I learned from Guy? And then he applies this to be able to get to tomorrow and be with his family. So that's the next clip, inshallah.
Come on, I'm coming! How do I get across? I gotta think. What would Guy do? What would Guy do? What would Guy do? What would I do? Hold this. Douglas? Hey, I know that guy!
It's not safe here.
I'll tell him. here, he would tell you to. Wow, you sound just like him.
He did it!
He's riding the sun. But not very well.
Everybody out of the way! Where's the danger? Who blew their shell?
I love you too!
Okay, صلى على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. So there were a few concepts in this last clip. The first one is, he was like, what would Guy do? And then once he thought about what Guy would do, he applied it to himself, and he's like, so this is what I will do. So what he learned from Guy, he applied so that he would follow them to tomorrow. When he was on his way to tomorrow, he stopped and he gathered all the other animals on his way so he could help them all go to tomorrow as well. And then what the family did, they were in tomorrow, but they were blowing their shells so that he could hear them and he could come to tomorrow as well. So what we want, how this applies to this lecture, is that our Imams and the Prophets, they know what Akhira looks like. They've seen it because, they've died before death. And so they understand how beautiful it is. They want us to go there with them. And so they've shown us a way. And on this way, they've also shown us how we can get there too. Like Imam Abu Bakr and Imam Sadiq, they also taught us the information so that we're able to use it to get there. And that's what Greg did. He looked at what he learned from Guy and applied it so that he could get to tomorrow. So once we're on Sirat al-Mustaqim, on this path to get back, or we're starting towards that, we should not hesitate to bring as many people with us on board as well. So do not be stingy with your knowledge. You need to teach it if it's the correct knowledge. Teach it to make sure as many of us can get on Sirat al-Mustaqim as possible. And the last thing is, even though our Imams and the Ahlulbayt, they're already in heaven, they're still calling to us, and their messages are still reaching out to us so that we can go and follow them as well. So those were the messages from this clip. Inshallah, we'll see you next week. وصلى على محمد وآل محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وأنت